Mosher adjusted the scope on his rifle as a sharp gust of wind rustled through the towering pine trees overhead, carrying the crisp, earthy scent of late summer in the Alaskan wilderness that he had called home for decades, a place where the landscape still felt wild and untamed even in 2026, much like it had during the Klondike gold rush of the 1890s when prospectors braved these same dense forests in search of fortune, or during the 1970s oil boom that brought waves of outsiders to build pipelines, while locals like Boaz's father taught their sons the old ways of reading the land through compass, moss on trees, and the subtle language of game trails. At 50, Boaz still possessed the keen eyes and steady hands of a hunter half his age, his weathered face etched with lines from countless expeditions through birch groves and moss-covered boulders. Yet today something felt different as he navigated unmarked paths that had swallowed inexperienced hikers for generations, much like the real disappearances documented by the Alaska State Troopers since the 1980s when search and rescue operations expanded amid growing tourism and off-grid living. The ground beneath his boots was damp from recent moisture, releasing that distinctive petrichor scent that always reminded him why he had chosen this remote life over the noisy conveniences of Anchorage, where he had once worked as a young park ranger in the 1990s before retiring to guide hunts and live simply with his wife Rose in their sturdy log cabin. Late summer was his favorite season, that perfect window before official hunting season when the forest pulsed with life, birds calling, squirrels chattering, moose tracks fresh in soft earth, yet not yet crowded with other hunters drawn by the allure of Alaska's vast public lands. Over 100 million acres managed by the Bureau of Land Management and U.S. Forest Service since the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act of 1980, which protected millions of acres while allowing sustainable use. Boaz paused mid-stride, his senses suddenly sharpening as the usual symphony of the woods fell into an unnatural silence, the kind of quiet that experienced outdoorsmen recognize as a warning sign, much like the eerie calm before the 1964 Great Alaska Earthquake that reshaped entire landscapes and taught generations the importance of heeding nature's signals. He glanced upward through gaps in the dense canopy, noting dark clouds gathering with alarming speed, the air shifting to carry the metallic tang of impending rain mixed with the creak of swaying branches overhead. Storms coming fast, he muttered to himself, checking his watch and realizing how late it had grown, the gray light filtering through the trees signaling that sunset was not far off, and he needed to retrace his steps to the safety of his cabin before darkness and rain made navigation impossible. Slinging his rifle over his shoulder, Boaz turned to head back, but a nagging feeling stopped him. The distinctive birch tree with the split trunk he had used as a landmark was nowhere in sight, nor was the cluster of emerald moss boulders that should have guided him. Instead, unfamiliar terrain stretched in every direction, low-hanging branches forcing him to duck and thick underbrush snagging at his pants as frustration began to build. Damn it, he breathed, the realization hitting like a cold wave. He had accidentally veered off the main trail, following what was likely a game path deeper into unfamiliar wilderness. A lapse that hadn't happened in years since his early days exploring these forests as a young ranger trained in the rigorous survival protocols developed after the 1970s when Alaska's vastness claimed too many lives due to poor preparation. He reached for his phone, hoping the downloaded GPS map would save him, but deep in the mountains surrounded by peaks that blocked signals, the screen showed no bars, a common reality in remote Alaska where satellite phones remain essential even today, as highlighted in modern search and rescue reports from the Alaska Rescue Coordination Center. Back to basics then, Boaz muttered, pulling out his old brass compass, a reliable heirloom from his father that had saved him more than once, holding it level and watching the needle settle before setting off southeast toward where he believed the original trail lay. The forest grew denser, the air heavier with the scent of approaching rain, distant thunder rumbling like a warning from the mountains that had witnessed everything from indigenous Athabascan hunting grounds for thousands of years to the 1897 to 1898 gold stampede that brought thousands of hopefuls into these very woods, many never returning. Vivid character moments define Boaz here, his weathered hands steady on the compass despite the growing wind, his mind flashing to past lessons from his father about reading the land, not just with tools but with all senses, the way moss grows thicker on the north side of trees, how animal trails lead to water, instincts honed over decades that now felt slightly dulled by age, prompting a rare moment of self-doubt. Maybe I am getting old. Emotionally, this chapter traces Boaz's shift from confident hunter to momentarily disoriented man whose pride in his wilderness mastery is gently tested, mirroring the philosophical teaching of humility before nature found in indigenous Alaskan traditions and echoed by thinkers like Henry David Thoreau and Walden, who warned that over-reliance on civilization dulls our primal connection to the wild, a lesson profoundly relevant today amid climate change and increasing extreme weather events. In Alaska, where 2020 storms have grown more unpredictable due to Arctic amplification. For English learners, notice advanced vocabulary like petrichor, the earthy, course, to scent after rain, from Greek roots meaning stone and fluid, and the idiom, veered off family struggles. As the first heavy drops deviate unexpectedly from a planned path, often used metaphorically for life decisions, along with past perfect structures. He had been following a game trail when the landmarks disappeared to narrate sequences with precision, skills that build fluency for describing personal challenges or outdoor adventures. Modern relevance strikes deep. In our hyper-connected yet increasingly isolated world of GPS apps and climate anxiety, Boaz's story reminds us that true navigation requires not just technology but inner compass and humility, qualities essential for facing life's unexpected detours. Whether literal trails or metaphorical crises like job loss or of rain began to fall and thunder cracked closer, Boaz pushed onward, unaware that his accidental detour was leading him not toward danger, but toward a hidden truth that would test his courage and change lives forever. What unexpected detour in your own life once felt like a frustrating mistake, only to later reveal itself as the precise path needed to discover something or someone important? And how might embracing the English idiom, getting lost to be found, help you reframe challenges into opportunities for growth and unexpected wisdom? Just as frustration threatened to overwhelm him and the rain began falling in earnest, a flicker of unnatural warm light caught Boaz's peripheral vision from behind a thick patch of bushes about 50 yards to his right, an anomaly in the deepening twilight that made him crouch instinctively, moving quietly forward with the caution of a man who had spent decades respecting the wilderness's secrets. Much like the real 19th century Alaskan sourdoughs who learned to approach unknown campsites warily. During the gold rush era when claim jumpers and desperate men hid in remote cabins, or the 1970s back to the land movement when off-grid survivalists built hidden shelters in these same forests to escape modern society. Drawing closer, Boaz carefully parted the wet foliage and froze in place at what he saw. Nestled into a small hillside was a cleverly camouflaged man-made structure, a low bunker or shelter almost entirely hidden beneath layers of brush, moss, and dirt, its entrance just tall enough for an adult to crouch through, with a thin metal ventilation pipe releasing a faint wisp of steam that quickly vanished in the cool, stormy air, suggesting active human occupation in a place so remote that even experienced hunters rarely ventured. Historical echoes resonate here. Such hidden structures recall real Alaskan bush living documented since the early 20th century, when homesteaders under the 1903 Homestead Act built isolated cabins, and later during the Cold War, when some families prepared remote fallout shelters amid nuclear fears, evolving into modern off-grid movements where people seek freedom from surveillance and regulations, yet sometimes cross into isolation that raises child welfare concerns as tracked by Alaska's Office of Children's Services in 2020's reports on remote family situations. Small child-sized footprints in the soft ground around the entrance led toward a nearby clearing, pulling Boaz's gaze to a small figure about 20 yards away, a little girl no older than 8 or 9, wearing a blue sweater and jeans, crouched near wildflowers and carefully placing colorful stones or insects into a glass jar with the absorbed focus of any curious child. A sight that instantly transported Boaz back 40 years to his own childhood hikes with his father, when he too filled pockets with treasures from the forest, creating a fleeting, unexpected smile that quickly faded into concern. Vivid character moments capture the tension, Boaz remaining perfectly still in his hiding spot, barely breathing as questions flooded his mind. What was a young girl doing alone in this remote wilderness, so far from any established trail or road? Where were her parents or guardian? And who had built this sophisticated hidden bunker that looked deliberately concealed rather than casually constructed? Before he could decide whether to reveal himself, the sound of heavy boots crunching on pine needles emerged from the bunker direction, and a man in his early 40s, lean and athletic with sharp, constantly scanning eyes, stepped out, calling Rayleigh, time to come inside, with urgency that suggested protective instinct, mixed with something harder. The girl, absorbed in her collection, didn't respond immediately, prompting the man to mutter and walk toward her, only for a loud crack of thunder to startle everyone and cause his gaze to lock directly onto Boaz's hiding spot. Emotionally, Boaz shifted from cautious curiosity to heightened alertness, his ranger-honed instinct sensing danger not in immediate threat, but in the unnatural isolation of a child in such a place, echoing philosophical teachings on the vulnerability of innocence from thinkers like Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who in the 18th century argued in Emile that children thrive in natural settings yet require protection from corrupting influences, a wisdom profoundly relevant today amid 2020's debates over off-grid parenting, social media isolation, and child welfare cases where remote living sometimes masks abuse or neglect. Advanced English learners should master here the idiom frozen shock to become suddenly immobile from surprise or fear, and vocabulary like camouflaged, hidden by blending with surroundings, from French military roots, using descriptive past continuous tense. He was moving quietly when the light caught his eye, to build suspenseful narratives, skills invaluable for storytelling, news reporting, or sharing personal wilderness adventures. Modern relevance connects powerfully to Alaska's unique challenges in 2026, where vast wilderness still allows hidden lives but also enables tragedies, as seen in real missing persons cases and increased use of drones and thermal imaging by search teams since the 2010s, teaching us that community vigilance and quick instincts can prevent harm. As thunder rumbled and rain intensified, the man whispered urgently to the girl and ushered her inside the bunker before turning to face Boaz directly, demanding he come out, his stance defensive yet controlled. Boaz emerged slowly with empty hands raised, introducing himself calmly as a lost hunter, diffusing tension by offering to show his backpack contents, binoculars, field knife, and bags of cleaned rabbit meat, while explaining his navigational error. The man, still suspicious, eventually relaxed slightly, claiming the land as private property with subtle markers and providing a detailed map to help Boaz find his way, though his abrupt dismissal and the storm's approach left lingering unease. This chapter of hidden lights and protective suspicion reveals that the wilderness can conceal both beauty and danger, urging us to trust sharpened instincts while questioning isolation that separates children from help. Have you ever stumbled upon something unexpected that triggered your protective instincts? And how can practicing English descriptive language, like painting scenes with sensory details, the damp earth released its earthy petrichor as thunder rumbled overhead, help you articulate such moments clearly to seek advice, warn others, or process your own moral choices? From the downpour that now hammered the forest canopy, Boaz followed the game trail and creek exactly as the map indicated, eventually intersecting the main path that led to his truck at the Pine Creek trailhead, the familiar route a reassuring contrast to the earlier disorientation, much like how 20th century Alaskan bush pilots relied on landmark navigation before GPS became standard in the 1990s, or how indigenous knowledge of seasonal trails preserved safety for generations before European contact. The drive home along winding mountain roads took nearly an hour, rain still sheeting against the windshield as Boaz's old Ford F-150 heater fought the chill, his mind replaying every detail of the encounter. The camouflaged bunker with its ventilation pipe, the girl's absorbed collecting of forest treasures, the man's sharp eyes and defensive posture, the subtle property markers he claimed to have missed despite years of ranging these lands. Historical depth enriches the doubt. Alaska's remote homestead culture, encouraged by the 1862 Homestead Act extended northward and later the 1971 Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, has long attracted those seeking independence, yet also raised concerns about child welfare in isolated settings. As documented in state reports since the 1980s, when cases of hidden families occasionally surfaced through accidental discoveries similar to Boaz's. Emotionally, Boaz transitioned from immediate survival focus to reflective unease during the drive, his pride in wilderness mastery shaken by the rare navigational apps, prompting rare self-doubt about aging. Maybe I am getting old, while protective instincts, honed as a former park ranger, nagged that something felt profoundly wrong about a young child in a bunker during an approaching storm. Arriving at the sturdy log cabin he and Rose had built together, its warm lights a beacon against the storm, Boaz dashed inside to the scent of wood smoke and Rose's cooking, her silver-streaked hair and gentle smile offering immediate comfort as she helped him with his wet gear and expressed relief at his safe return. Vivid moments unfold around the dinner table, Boaz recounting the lost trail and bunker discovery over steaming rabbit stew, Rose listening intently before pulling out an old newspaper article about a missing 8-year-old girl named Rayleigh Winston, whose photo and description matched the child exactly, reported taken by her estranged father weeks earlier, while her grandmother was hospitalized. Philosophical teaching emerges in the tension between individual freedom and communal responsibility, echoing John Locke's 17th-century ideas on natural rights balanced by social contract, or modern environmental ethics debates about off-grid living versus child protection, relevant in 2026 amid discussions of remote work, climate migration, and welfare checks in rural areas. Advanced English elements include the idiom "something felt off," intuition signaling wrongness, and reported speech for recounting conversations. He said it was his property, but I wondered why a child would live in a bunker. Plus cause-effect structures. Because I got lost following game trails, I discovered the hidden shelter that led to the missing girl. To build logical narratives. Tools perfect for sharing incidents, writing reports, or reflecting in journals. Modern relevance ties to today's digital age, where missing children alerts spread rapidly via apps, yet remote Alaska still challenges responders, teaching universal wisdom that ordinary people like Boaz become heroes through simple awareness and willingness to act, even when tired or doubting themselves. As the power flickered and went out during the storm, forcing Boaz to start the generator, Rose cut her finger in the sudden darkness, a small injury he bandaged with practiced care, while their conversation deepened about the girl's safety and the man's possible motives. Boaz's growing doubt. Why stay in a bunker with a storm coming? Why the defensive questions about who sent him? Reflected emotional development from hunter's pragmatism to moral guardian, a shift that would soon demand action. This chapter of maps and memories at home shows how one chance encounter ripples into conscience, urging us never to dismiss unease as mere coincidence. When has an ordinary day's mishap led you to question a larger injustice? And how can using English reflective phrases like "something about the situation felt off because" help you process doubts and take ethical steps toward helping others? After midnight, with the storm easing and power restored, Boaz checked the generator one final time when the crunch of tires on wet gravel alerted him to an unexpected visitor at the cabin. The man from the bunker, Raymond Winston, standing tensely on the porch under the pretense of retrieving his map. His damp clothes and evasive eyes betraying deeper intent in a scene echoing real late-night domestic standoffs documented in Alaska State Trooper reports since the 1990s, when remote. Confrontations often escalated due to isolation and unresolved custody disputes. Boaz, sensing danger, armed himself with a spade and confronted Winston, who dropped the pretense upon seeing the newspaper article about the missing girl on the table, pulling a handgun and firing when Boaz refused to cooperate. The shot grazing Boaz's arm in a moment of raw survival instinct honed from years tracking game and navigating hazards like the 1964 earthquake's aftermath or modern bear encounters that demand split-second decisions. Vivid action unfolds as Boaz rolled, grabbed his rifle, returned fire to disable Winston's vehicle tire, then pursued into the dark forest, tracking footprints with ranger precision until a second shot narrowly missed him, leading to a tense standoff where Boaz wounded Winston's leg non-fatally and held him at gunpoint until arriving police tackled and cuffed the suspect. Emotionally, Boaz moved from cautious homeowner to decisive protector, his love for Rose and instinctive care for the unseen child fueling courage despite age and injury, philosophically embodying Aristotle's concept of practical wisdom, phronesis, in choosing the right action under pressure. A teaching timeless, yet urgently modern in 2026 amid rising awareness of parental abduction cases tracked by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, where quick civilian response often bridges gaps in official searches. Advanced English shines in action sequences with vivid verbs and sequencing adverbs. Suddenly, Winston burst from behind the tree, charging directly at Boaz. Idioms like split-second decision, instant choice in crisis, and conditional past for hypotheticals. If I hadn't checked the generator, he might have reached the door unnoticed. Structures that enhance storytelling fluency for recounting events in interviews, reports, or motivational talks. Historical elements include Alaska's rugged self-reliance culture from gold rush days through pipeline eras, where individuals often became first responders, paralleling today's community vigilance programs. Modern relevance warns of the dangers of unchecked isolation and entitlement in family disputes, while celebrating how ordinary retirees like Boaz and Rose can intervene effectively. With Winston in custody, police confirmed Rayleigh's location at the bunker via the map Boaz provided, rescuing the drugged but unharmed girl during the coordinated operation as the storm fully passed. At the station, Boaz and Rose met the frightened yet resilient child, whose small smile of recognition sparked their quiet decision to offer temporary foster care until her grandmother recovered. This chapter of midnight gunfire and rescue illustrates that courage often arrives uninvited, transforming routine evenings into defining tests of character. What inner strength have you discovered in a moment of unexpected crisis, and how can mastering English action vocabulary and sequencing help you share those stories to inspire courage in yourself and others facing their own hidden bunkers of fear or injustice? In the days and weeks following Rayleigh's rescue, as legal proceedings against Raymond Winston advanced with charges of kidnapping, assault, and endangerment ensuring he would face significant prison time, Boaz and Rose welcomed the young girl into their mountain cabin as temporary foster parents, transforming their quiet retirement into a home filled with the sounds of a child's footsteps and curious questions, much like real Alaskan families who have opened their doors to displaced children. Since the 1970s, Indian Child Welfare Act sought to keep Native youth connected to cultural roots amid broader foster system challenges. Vivid moments of healing unfold daily, Rayleigh's initial wariness melting into tentative trust as Rose taught her to bake simple bread in the wood stove while sharing stories of her own childhood, Boaz patiently showing her safe ways to explore the forest edges, collecting leaves and stones without venturing too far, helping her process trauma through gentle routines that echoed therapeutic approaches developed since the 1990s trauma-informed care models. Emotionally, Rayleigh blossomed from quiet withdrawal to bright curiosity, her jar of forest treasures now displayed proudly on a shelf, while Boaz and Rose rediscovered the joys of guiding a young life, their bond strengthened by shared purpose after decades of partnership. Philosophically, the chapter embodies the universal wisdom of second chances and communal responsibility, drawing from Buddhist concepts of interconnectedness, interbeing, and Western ideas of restorative justice, teaching that one man's loss of direction can become another's salvation, profoundly relevant in 2026 as societies grapple with aging populations, foster care shortages, and the healing power of nature-based therapy amid mental health crises exacerbated by isolation and climate events. Advanced English learning focuses on reflective narrative closure with phrases like, looking back, that detour became the path to, and vocabulary such as resilience, ability to recover from difficulties, or the idiom, light at the end of the tunnel, hope after hardship, enabling learners to articulate personal growth stories with depth and empathy, skills for college essays, job interviews, or supporting others in conversation. Modern relevance highlights Alaska's ongoing efforts in child welfare and community support networks, reminding us that families come in many forms and that opening one's home, even temporarily, can rewrite a child's future, as seen in real programs pairing retirees with foster youth. As Rayleigh's grandmother slowly recovered and legal arrangements progressed, the Mosher cabin echoed with laughter during simple evenings of storytelling by the fire. Boaz, realizing his getting old, fears were unfounded. His instincts had never been sharper, his heart never fuller. The journey closed with quiet gratitude. A lost trail had led to a found child, proving that accidents can be divine detours and that ordinary lives gain extraordinary meaning through compassion. What quiet, lost trail in your life might actually be guiding you toward a greater purpose of helping another? And how can embracing English tools for sharing redemption stories, rich with sensory details, emotional honesty, and hopeful reflections, allow you to inspire change while finding deeper peace in your own healing journey?